Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Russ Ganem, and I am Associate Provost and Dean of International Programs here at the University of Iowa. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you to today's panel discussion on international teaching. This is the third in our series entitled Cultivating Success, a Global Faculty Initiative. And if you'll indulge me, I'd like to give you a little bit of history about the series and then talk briefly about this afternoon's conversation. Please come on in. Thanks to our colleague, Gigi Durham, Professor of Journalism and Mass Communications and University Ombudsperson and all-around great academic professional, we began the Cultivating Success series about a year ago to provide resources for international faculty, especially at the beginning of their careers. We know that the onboarding of international students is quite extensive, but very little exists to help international faculty adapt to their new environment. To a certain extent, Cultivating Success serves as a means to help with the orientation of new international faculty. In our first session, and again, this is the third, was entitled Global Mentoring, Strategies for International Faculty Success, and included topics such as navigating the administration, promotion and tenure, as well as maintaining a healthy work-life balance. Then, in September of 2024, we launched the second of our panel discussions, this one centering on international scholarship and creative work. Among other topics, the webinar focused on cross-national research collaborations, grant proposals, co-authorship, and ways to promote research to domestic and international audiences. The subject of today's Cultivating Success discussion, international teaching, is the logical predecessor to what came before, or the logical successor, pardon me, to what came before. Our emphasis will be on pedagogical approaches, adjusting to environments based on transnational knowledge, and enhancing learning outcomes, all through a global lens. So to help us explore this topic, we've enlisted the help of our esteemed colleagues in the Center for Teaching. So Anna Fleming and Tamar Bernfeld will guide our discussion today. We also have several distinguished faculty members across a number of disciplines whom it is my privilege to introduce right now. So in addition to Gigi and Anna, your official title is Assistant Provost for Teaching and Learning, and you're the Director of the Center for Teaching, right? Is that correct? Okay. It's 2 lines long, right? Well, no, I mean, it's, yeah, at some point, it's, yeah, right. It's like, oh, we know you, and, okay, yeah, okay, it's good. Okay. And Tamar, you are the Assistant Director of the Center for Teaching, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, one of a number of Assistant Directors, okay. We also have Richard Peter, okay, who is the nationwide Associate Professor of Finance in the Tippie College of Business. Next, we have Beatrice McKenda, who is Associate Professor of Instruction in the French and Italian Department in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. And Beatrice, I've known for a long, long time, as she is the head of our Swahili program, which has been a rousing success for the past decade and a half. Then we have Eunjung Kim, Clinical Assistant Professor in the College of Education. Welcome. Okay. And then Michael O'Rourke, who is an Assistant Professor in the Department of Epidemiology in the College of Public Health. So before we begin the panel discussion, I would like to thank obviously our panelists, our audience, the Center for Teaching, and also our staff in international programs, and in particular our Communications and Relations Unit. So please give a round of applause to Daniel Vorwerk, who's out in the hall and who organized this event. Also like to thank Amy Green in our office, Kate Murphy, and Ben Partridge. And with that, I will turn things over to Tamar, who will lead our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is this mic on? Yes, it's working. Okay, good. I'm the tester. All right. So we're just going to get started with an introductory question to get an idea of where some of our panelists come from and how they got to be here at the University of Iowa. So I'm going to start with, please tell us a little about your trajectory as an international scholar. What is your country of origin, and how did you come to the University of Iowa? Dr. Kim, would you be comfortable starting us off?
Hi, my name is Eunjung Kim. I'm from South Korea, and actually, I didn't come to United States or University of Iowa for study as a doctoral student or as an international scholar. I came here to Iowa City 2012 as a family because my husband actually studied his PhD program in journalism. And I didn't have any plan for being actually professor, but which is different from now. But when I came here, I was just, before I came here, I was social study teacher, and I had time off from my work and came here and then work as a paraeducator at the school system. That gives me an idea of what can I do more in terms of this diverse population at the school system. That gave me motivation to pursue for my PhD program, which I really appreciate that opportunity. And at the time, still I was holding my job in South Korea, so I didn't know about being a professor, but I still studied and finished the doctoral program. During the dissertation period, I had opportunity to teach before even finished dissertation. I had opportunity to teach higher education, small college in North Carolina. That gave me kind of determined decision to be faculty member in the higher education. So I quit my job in South Korea at the time. And then I got an opportunity to work here, coming back to University of Iowa. So now I'm teaching social study education to teacher candidates. It's a long answer, I'm sorry. But
Right. Hi, everyone. My name is Beatrice Mkenda. I am from Tanzania. Tanzania is in the East African region, and I am from the city of Kilimanjaro. That makes it easy, close to Kenya. But I went to University of Wisconsin-Madison. That's where I earned my MA and my PhD in African languages and literature, and I did minor in second language acquisition. So after the University of Wisconsin-Madison, then I came to the University of Iowa for work. Through that time, I've been here for about 10 years now, and while teaching at the University of Iowa, I've had opportunity to obtain a Carnegie African Diaspora Fellowship, and that took me back to Tanzania, where I worked with the University of Dar es Salaam. I worked on language pedagogy, ran several workshops on how to teach a second language. And also, I've had opportunity to do presentations in conferences, both in the United States and outside the United States. So that's the opportunity that I've had as the Associate Professor of Instruction at the University of Iowa.
Okay. Thanks, Beatrice. So my name is Michael O'Rourke. I am from Northern Ireland, so just the north of Ireland. I came from Queen's University Belfast. I did my PhD in cancer epidemiology. I then went on to do a postdoctorate in pharmacoepidemiology, so looking at medications and repurposing medications for cancer patients. And then I applied to do a postgraduate certificate in higher education teaching, which is a formal qualification in the UK for lecturers who sort of what I'm doing now at the University of Iowa. And I then also did a postdoctoral fellowship as a Cancer Research UK fellowship, so an independent fellowship, brought in my own salary and funding support for 3 years. And then I applied, I seen a job advertised on Indeed.com for Iowa, and I applied for Iowa, and everyone always asks me, why did you come to Iowa? And I always go, because the weather's better than in the UK, and it is. But aside from that, you know, I think I came here for the resources. Iowa is amazing for cancer research. We have our cancer registry, which is just upstairs here in the Capitol Center. So bank specimens for me to do some, cancer research in the lab. So yeah, there's a lot of draws that brought me here. I'm glad to be here.
Thanks, Michael. So my name is Richard Peter. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm from Germany originally, so people usually guess it's somewhere in Europe, but they can't quite pin it down. I grew up in a small village in the south of Germany in a rural farming community, which sometimes helps when you talk to our students because I can relate to some of their experiences. I went to school in Ingolstadt, which is mostly known as the Audi headquarters in the south, and did my undergrad coursework at Ludwig Maximilians University, which is an old one in Europe. So it was founded 1472. I had to look up the exact number. So before Christopher Columbus landed in the Americas. Not that it matters, but anyway. Then I switched to the business school where I did my PhD, still in Germany. And I came to Iowa in 2015. And I'm now an associate professor at the Tippie College of Business, where I teach classes in risk management and insurance. So we just started our insurance major because insurance and financial services is also a big part of the state economy with lots of jobs and opportunities for our graduates. So if you hear somebody who is still looking for what to do in business, that might be a good opportunity. So that's my pitch. And unlike Ong Jung, I actually found my partner here. So I met my husband here in Iowa, and which is a big part of like me staying here and being happy here. But what brought me here was definitely professional opportunity as an academic, as a researcher, as a scholar, and also as a teacher. And I'm very happy to be here with you guys this afternoon.
Thank you so much. That's so interesting. We have people from, all over the globe, literally. So we're going to just sort of get into the meat of things here. Teaching in a new environment is challenging for everyone, but for international faculty, there may be differences in pedagogical approaches and student-instructor relationships that make the teaching experience maybe even more challenging. So I wonder if you can share any experiences or anecdotes that illustrate the ways you navigated teaching with those kinds of differences in mind here at Iowa. Maybe we could start with Beatrice.
So I teach Swahili, and I also teach content courses about African languages and culture. And this semester I'm teaching a course on exploring East African languages and culture. So teaching in a new environment is a challenge. And coming from University of Dar es Salaam, where I went to school, there's a difference. The courses you have there, those are the courses that are required for you to graduate. But when I teach Swahili here, there's so many languages that students can take. They don't have to take Swahili. So in a way, to me, it's like I have to be a marketer, developing strategies that will help students coming to my class and make them engaged. And what really helps me to invite more students in my classes, and the Swahili courses here at the University of Iowa are really popular, I will say. They fill up so quickly. Even after the requirement changed, language requirement changed, we only have elementary 1 and elementary 2, but we open 7 sections. They fill out really quickly. And what makes that possible is the way we engage our students in the classroom, the unique culture and history of Swahili that we share with them, something that they have never heard before. So those are the things that we see. So at times I feel like, I have to motivate them. I have to engage them. I have to be strategic. Even the way I develop my courses, they have to be in a way when students leave my class, they look forward to coming back tomorrow. And that way will sustain and keep the enrollment going.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm going to ask for maybe one more. Maybe Richard, you could talk a little bit. I feel as though things might be a little more formal in European contexts, and is that an issue for you?
Yeah, so one thing I would like to mention quickly is the notion of assessment, and that comes to that formality, Gigi, that you mentioned. So a lot of the courses that I took when I was an undergrad in Germany, your grade was based entirely on your performance in one single final exam. Okay. Now, this is a very clear policy. It's very clean, right? Everybody knows it. But of course, if you screw that up, you have to retake the class. Like it's really harsh. Now here, and you might say maybe this is German efficiency or whatever label you want to use, but that's what it was like. Now here, assessment is much more gradual, much more chopped up, and as an instructor, you're also challenged to think about different kinds and types of assessment. Some are more engagement-based, participation-based, others are more formal, like we still have midterms and final exams and whatnot, right? But there's a broader range, and that's something I definitely had to get used to and also ask my colleagues, how do you do this? How do you do that? Also consult with technology. How do you implement that in a smaller classroom or a larger classroom and things like that? So this was a learning curve for me because it was so different from how I was used to assessment being conducted. And I can share an anecdote, which also makes this a little bit more relatable. So the first midterm I gave, I remember that it was a fall semester of 2015. First midterm I gave in that very first class I was teaching here at Iowa, it was a little bit too harsh. Okay, so the students might have chosen different language. And then when I returned the grades, and I was staring at the faces, and there was a girl, I still remember her name, and she asked, "Is there going to be a curve in this class?" And being completely oblivious, I gave the worst answer you can probably give, which was, "I don't know." Because I didn't know what she was referring to. So I sent the class to shock. But what did I do? I asked a colleague, I said, okay, what's the expectation, right? How do we do this? And then I told my class, okay, this is how your grades are going to be determined, okay? And then, I mean, there are ways that points are curved or exams are curved in Germany as well, right? It's not just a very brutal policy, but that was like a cultural difference that was very clear in this particular moment. Okay, he's coming from somewhere else. It's a different environment. He still has to figure out how these things work here, and it was very obvious.
Thank you. Actually, I was educated in Commonwealth countries. I'd never heard of a curve either until I came to the US. Anyway.
All right, we're going to move on to the next question. This one is about language, right? So as we know, there are many different types of English spoken around the world, and each is characterized by its accent, vocabulary, syntax, expressions. So this question's in two parts. Were any of you anxious about your own language fluency when you started out? And how did you handle these issues? And the second part is, did you have any concerns about comprehending your students' spoken English? So, Michael, would you want to start this one?
It's going to be really easy for me because I'm a British speaker. So English was my first language. So this was really easy. But I think for me, even amongst that, there were some differences. I mean, I obviously grew up listening to American television, watching movies. So the differences in spelling between British English, American English, how I teach that in my class, I still make some mistakes and will include, spell realize with an S instead of a Z. Even remembering to say C instead of said, those things and how I pronounce words, those small things come up, but most of it, they tend to lead to momentary confusion or, amusement to my students as opposed to being a check mark against me in any way. So I think it just adds to my charm. They don't seem to mind. And I'm forgiven a lot. And I think there's a lot of, as you mentioned, lots of colloquialisms in our speech. I say we a lot, like a wee bit of time or things like that. I'm going to give you a wee bit of extra time for this. And I think they just see that as a term of endearment. They don't mind. I think students, initially would turn their heads, what's he mean? But generally they get along fine. So I'm going to stop there because I don't have too many issues with that.
And Jen, do you want to?
Yeah, actually, my experience is totally opposite to you. When I came to Iowa City, United States, I didn't have a skill to speak and listening. And so I'm honest with you, at this moment, I have very serious anxiety to speak in English. And that it's been a very hard time for me to figure out, like, understanding students' expression or even my expression in a relevant way to my classroom. So from these all experience, first of all, my expression is enough for students to understand. Second, and accent itself. So when I was starting to teach, I was very apologetic. Hey, if you don't understand me, please let me know. I'm still learning English. And it was kind of, for me, it was just kind of, I have to apologize, or just I have to show some concern to my students, so students understand what's going on in my, cognitive area. But it kind of shift my perspective from like being apologetic to showing my confidence and also sincerity. Hey, I am here to teach you, but that doesn't mean I'm fluent in English. But at the same time, I have a genuine intention to teach you well and listen to you well. But at the same time, I'm not gonna be apologetic to you in terms of my accent, in terms of my expression, because this is my cultural heritage. And I made that clear upfront now, and then students totally understand how I feel in my classroom. And even now, I have some kind of moment. Hey, what's the expression in English? Can you tell me? And students really are actually welcoming to teach me. So what I'm saying is, when I came here, with this low level of speaking in English, and that gives me a lot of anxiety and questioning about my ability to teach. But at the same time, I just switched my mind. Students actually should know better in terms of global perspective on these different accent or different types of English, so they can deconstruct their mindset. I'm sorry to say this, but the students even have the different hierarchy of English, like British and French accent English, better than accent from Asia when they speak English. But I made that clear. There is no such a one standard English. We have to embrace global level of English, accent and expressions. That is also good for my students because they are teacher candidates, and they should know better when they get into their professional, work at the school system. There are so many different students who have a different background, including language. So I now have some, I don't know, I'm saying just trying to shifting my perspective gives me confidence, and also my students learn better, in my opinion. Yeah.
Sure. I think my experience is a little bit different. So I come from Tanzania, and Tanzania is one of the African countries, and people from African countries, normally you speak 3, 4, 5 to 6 languages. And therefore, in Tanzania, for example, I grew up speaking Chaga and Rombo. These are the native languages. And then I go to school, I speak Swahili. And then I go to middle school, then I start learning in English. And the English we use in Tanzania is a British English, which is in a way, it's a Tanzanian English because it doesn't even sound like British English, by the way. So when I came here, I was happy and I knew that I speak English. But when I stepped at Madison, Wisconsin, they asked me, what is your name? I said, Beatrice. They say, what? Beatrice. Can you spell it? I spell. They say, oh, Beatrice. So I was surprised, like even my name changed. So I went to school, to the university with my first degree in English, and I was so proud, like I speak English. But when I came to the United States, it was difficult for people to understand me and even to understand them as well. Then I went to talk to my supervisor. She said, you have to ask people to speak slowly. So can you please say that again? pardon me, please. And also, people say, oh, what did you say? Can you say that again? So I keep repeating. But after being here for this long, I find myself adopting to American English, and I'm still adopting it. And as I adapt it, I also realize that my students are adapting to my own cultural and linguistic orientation.
That's great. I feel like we should stay with this question.
Yeah, certainly. So I don't think I was ever really anxious speaking English. I felt pretty confident. I was like, okay, it is what it is, right? Just gonna go in and do the best that you can, right? Because that's really the only option. I think the students also didn't really have trouble understanding me. I remember like my perspective as an international scholar. It was something that was helpful for international students to bond with me. So there were several moments when we were in my office and office hours, and they shared, oh, they came to the US from a different country, what their experience was like, what my experience was like. And it helped me bond with them, create some kind of commonalities or common experiences. And I think that was good for the learning environment. If anything, I would say that sometimes there's like cultural or contextual factors that are kind of hard to grasp, or as an outsider that you don't really realize are in the picture. So I remember one story, I'm sharing all these anecdotes with you, I hope you don't mind. I remember one story where a student talked to me after class, and he was really excited about the Fry Fest that was coming up. So I was like, oh, this is really interesting. So Iowans have, they must have some celebration where they fry all kinds of food, and they like it so much that they call it Fry Fest. So we were having this conversation, and I had like the completely wrong thing in my mind. And this exists, right? It's a state fair where we fry lots of food. But that's not what the student was talking about, right? So it was not so much a language issue. It was more a context issue, because there was this football coach, Hayden Fry. I probably don't have to explain that to you guys. And it's something that I was completely unaware of. And that's a factor of like culture or socialization. Well, we use language to convey that, right? And these were some things that are missing, or that you have to learn when you move from one place to another, to pick up all these other things and to make sense, to extract some meaning out of the things that you hear when students talk to you. Okay, so now I know what the Fry Fest is. So when students tell me about it and that they enjoy going, I understand what's going on. But that's just one example where language sometimes creates these things, right? And then there's like miscommunication. And I think what was powerful for students is sometimes, like when I write on the document camera, then all of a sudden I'm uncertain. Like, how do you spell maintenance? I know that you can screw it up many different ways. And I share that with my students, right? And I think this vulnerability is actually a strength, because it teaches the students, well, you're not perfect either. You're not omniscient, right? We make mistakes. There's certain things that we don't know, and it's okay to make mistakes as long as you're willing to learn from them and improve. So you can even use that as an opportunity to show that you're vulnerable, that you don't know everything. And students tend to respond well to that in my experience.
Yeah, I think so too. I found Iowa students to be very open to that sort of thing. And I was just going to say, I've spent some time in the Deep South, and I was worried that I wouldn't be able to understand the accents down there. You know, that was kind of a challenge as well. So just different versions of English are everywhere and can present challenges. So I want to ask you all, what was your experience going up for promotion and or tenure, since we're on different tracks here? As an international faculty member, was the global diversity that you brought to the classroom recognized as a strength, do you think? I guess maybe I will start with you, Richard.
Yeah, that's fine. So I think what was definitely recognized was the global diversity in terms of my scholarship and the research that I do. I'll just start there for a moment, because I have like a broad network of international collaborators in Europe and in the US, and I attend all kinds of conferences. So I carry the name, the brand, Iowa, TP College of Business, to all these different places through the scholarship that I do. And I think that was definitely recognized. I know one of the letter writers in my tenure file, they wrote that it's a loss of human capital for Germany and Europe that I left. But of course, good for Iowa, right? So, so I think that was recognized. In terms of teaching, I think the international aspect was pointed out favorably because it allows me to credibly create some examples and case studies in the classroom for how things are done differently in different countries. Okay, so and just to give you a brief example, so I teach insurance. Okay, and one thing that we always talk about in insurance is rate making, how premiums are set, how rates are set, and the factors that insurance companies collect to do that. Okay. Now let's think about auto insurance. You look at the type of car that somebody drives, how many miles they drive, etc., where they live, right? The zip code, is it urban, is it rural? But then you also look at gender, right? Males versus females. And if you look at accident statistics, you see like clear differences. So it does make sense that insurance looks at that. There's other lines of insurance like life insurance or annuity or retirement products where it makes a lot of sense to look at that because life expectancy is different. Okay, so we talk about that, it makes a lot of sense. And then I reveal to my students that in Germany, where I'm from, in the European Union, where I did my PhD, and while I was doing it, they passed a law that banned gender-based pricing in all lines of insurance. So they just said, this is discriminatory, we won't do this anymore, insurance companies deal with it, make it work, end of discussion. And then we talk about that. And I think students appreciate that, right? Because I bring this perspective, I was there when it happened, so it's very real, it's very tangible. And it always creates the most amazing discussion in the classroom where people say, oh, I know how this guy drives and I know how my girlfriend drives and whatnot. So it's a really fun thing to talk about in the classroom. But I think what I can do, or what my international perspective allows me to do, is to make this more tangible, to make this more real. The way I can bring this into the classroom, I can show them newspaper articles. I can say, like, this is how I read about it in the newspaper when I was there while it happened. And I think this adds something to the whole discussion that otherwise I couldn't do it, right? Otherwise it would be purely academic. And I think the students appreciate that. So I would say, yes, it was recognized as an asset, as a strength, both for my scholarship and also in my teaching. And overall, I must give a lot of credit to my department and also the college for being very supportive and very nurturing, especially for somebody from like a different academic system coming in. So that was certainly a general factor that was helpful in my P&T process.
That's great to know.
Okay.
Maybe
Yeah,
Gunjan to
yeah.
add to that.
Yes, I actually have a little bit different track from other faculty members. I'm in clinical assistant position, faculty, which is a little different in terms of a research portion and teaching and service. But basically, my department really value my perspective. I brought, especially Korean society is more diverse and coming to multicultural society, I use that this SK Korean society example as a research, and then compare and contrast the differences in American situation. So I had some articles which have been published, and that gives me more positive perspective toward my promotion. I just got the reappointment. So that all things are happening in a very positive way. Also, what Richard said, I not only for the promotion, but also teaching content itself. I use my case like a South Korean's case or Japanese or Chinese case in terms of a global perspective of some incident or events in my classroom because I'm teaching social studies topics. So bring these are different topics from that country. Sometimes my teacher candidates have no idea, but I deliver the message or episode directly in first person experience, and they really appreciate it. And I feel that, this is a good opportunity for me to promote this global perspective through my experience. At the same time, I volunteer actually to present Korean culture to K-12 classrooms, and which is very wonderful experience in person. At the same time, my department, my DO really appreciate that kind of volunteers to bring my experience into K-12 classroom in terms of global perspectives. So
That's good to hear that you have administrative support. I'm just going to ask one more, just because, Michael, you're in sort of the throes as an assistant professor of, navigating tenure.
So yeah, I'm kind of a unique perspective here, probably amongst the group, in that I'm just about to go through the process of promotion and tenure. And I think for me, as an international member of faculty, there's not too many other members who are international in my department, and that kind of, I think, is a strength in essence. I've come from a country that's got a universal access to healthcare, and when you've come from a region like the UK, and in comparison to health, working in the Department of College of Public Health, it creates a lot of unique insights for students and for other members of faculty. And you see these, we do a lot of work in disparities and access to care and access to services, and a lot of it's actually brought about by the actual basis of the systemic issues with the healthcare and access to healthcare in the US versus the UK. So that's a nice perspective. I feel sometimes the international perspective of funding as well. So like you, Richard, the EU funds are completely different, and their fund amounts tend to be a lot smaller than what's accessible here in the US. So NIH, obviously, a huge conglomerate of available resources and finances in typical times. And I feel like, when I compare NIH funds and for the line of work that I do in cancer research, they're just so much more beyond what was ever dreamed possible for UK funds. So like funding mechanisms are different. I think for me, that's also been a disadvantage because I've come here, I've not gone through the same schooling system. I've not had the mentors that have kind of maybe progressed me through an MPH and a PhD, and then are going to take me through a postdoc and then onwards. So I feel like even across the different states in the US, which are really like 50 different countries sometimes, I feel like students always say to me that, you might feel like you're at a disadvantage, but, between states, there's a lot of differences as well. So I feel sometimes that I am at a disadvantage in terms of trajectory and knowing what lines of funds I should be applying for, things like that. But, I feel as well that I do bring this global perspective. I have had the kind of insights of doing my PhD in pancreatic cancer and creating a European consortium of studies looking at rare disease and rare tumors. And I feel like that's helped. It's been attractive. I've been seen as exotic to an institution like Iowa and have come here. But I also feel like after a time, when you've disassociated yourself with your home country, you have less and less ties as time goes by. And if you do not have active collaborations, those dwindle with time. So yeah.
Okay, we're going to move on to another question. This one's about teaching and developing your teaching skills. So what resources on and off campus did you use to build your teaching skills? And can you tell us how they helped you to become the excellent college instructors that you are? Beatrice, would you be okay starting us off?
So I realize, first of all, when it starts at the faculty level, there are so many resources that are available here for international faculty that I found. One, there's a Obermann Group Discussion Center that I engage with, and that helped me a lot to understand and keep up with my field, and also help with my teaching in the classroom. So it helps my teaching career and also in terms of research as well. I'm not doing research because I'm a lecturer, so I teach 80% is teaching and the 20% is service. They just changed that. But engaging with these groups helped me to keep up with my field, and it helped me to keep up with my career as well. Another resources that we have is the Stanley Museum. This is very helpful. It helps me a lot to introduce my students to the language and the culture, and therefore I see my students more engaged. They speak more and they have more to say because they can see things and they can interact with the pieces that they see from the museum. Another resources that I have also is the Center for Teaching. We have different groups that I was in the Transparency Teaching, the group that we had for one semester, and that helped me a lot with my teaching in the classroom. So there are resources that are available, and also when I go back to the department, they give like funds to go to the conference. So every year I go to the African Language Teachers Association conference, and the department support that, and that helps me to keep up with what is going on when it comes to teaching African languages and literature.
Would else like to that?
Do you want to add something, Jen?
I'm from teaching and learning department, so actually my whole skill should be grounded in how to teach. But at the same time, as a doctoral student, when I came here, I totally saw the differences between Korean setting and American setting. Basically, student-centered activity and also discussion-based process, even in the when I was studying. But now I can also see all these different techniques and the method, which I have to be updated all the time. Like Beatrice says, going to conference and the Center for Teaching, I actually attended a lot even during my doctoral program. So that helped me. And again, I have to keep up with all these teaching strategies, and also I have a background for educational psychology, focusing on learning and cognition and how to teach in an effective way. So basically, academic-wise, and also using these all resources at the University of Iowa, I really want to encourage you as a doctoral student to just attend whenever you have chance. That gives me a lot of rich experience and insight throughout this whole doctoral program, and also as a faculty members.
Yeah, sure.
So I can only add to that the Center for Teaching has always been very helpful, and I can only emphasize their programming and all the workshops and things that they do. So I think that has been great for me, and I was part of the Early Career Faculty Academy, and I think Anna and we were just reminiscing. I think I was part of the first cohort, right? So, so that was hugely beneficial. I always involve my students when it comes to thinking about how things work in the classroom. And usually my syllabus, the way I construct my syllabus, there's always some placeholders. And this is for little things or activities that I want to do with my students to incentivize these activities, for them to tell me how did activity XYZ work. So I get immediate feedback right away, and I can use that as like an iterative process for the next cohort. And I think students appreciate that because it shows that you care, right? You want to understand, does this work or not? And not just via formal assessment, also from like the perception and how they experience the activity and things like that. And it also helps to keep things fresh, right? So one of the common themes here in our discussion was it's like a continued process, right? So just because something worked last year or 5 years ago doesn't mean it's going to work with the next set of students, because it's always new students, right? And the culture changes, how they're socialized changes, their backgrounds change, right? So the assumption that because something worked in the past, it's going to work again needs to be demonstrated, right? It doesn't hold automatically. So these are some of the strategies that I use. And as I said, big shout out to the Center for Teaching. One more anecdote. So I'm the anecdote man. So Jean Florman, some of you might remember her. So she was the director of the Center for Teaching, I think before you, Anna, took over, right? And she helped me big time with my teaching statement when I came up for promotion and tenure, because guess what? Teaching statement is not a thing in Germany, okay? And that was at a time before ChatGPT, right? So who do I ask? I asked the Center for Teaching for help. And it was hugely beneficial to have somebody with a fresh set of eyes. And of course, I didn't want to ask my colleagues, tell them that I've never written a teaching statement before when I come up for PNT, right? So take advantage of the programming, but also involve your core stakeholders, and that's your students, right? So
that's great. I wonder if we could just hear quickly from Michael about this.
I think for me, I think we're very lucky at a Northern institution like Iowa that they put such an emphasis, strong emphasis on teaching quality. Where I've come from, that wasn't always the case. So an R1 institution that was really driven by outputs and metrics. And I feel that there is more emphasis given to teaching here at Iowa, which is great for our students and good for us because the quality of teaching improves. And so, like Richard, with Anna, I was part of the Early Career Faculty Academy. I came here with a formal teaching and qualification, but it was really nice to have the additional support in my first year of classes because the infrastructure set up, ICON, I've never used ICON as a course management system. The expectations from students were so much different. The in-person office hours, their line of questioning, and how to deal with queries. Like Richard gives some anecdotal evidence of that too. I mean, I would reflect on that too and have some similar situations. So yeah, I mean, I think all of that was important as well. And I think I found that, resources for online modules are important too. So one of the requirements in our Department of Epidemiology is that each faculty member, although we're only 20% teaching, 80% research, services squeezed in amongst that too. I feel like I spend a lot more time in teaching than I'm assigned to. I think a lot of us would fall into that remit, right? So we're put into these boxes where you're only meant to allocate 20% of your effort for teaching, but I put a lot more effort, I think, in that, and only because I feel like I need to. The students request it. I get something out of it too. I enjoy teaching, so. And I would say that, there's other resources here, like CITA and others who can help with those online modules. We actually had those folks come and, reinvent our online course offering. So it was no longer duplicating effort. It was creating a standalone course that could be updated periodically and just meet the learner needs much better than our in-person offering was doing. So lots of support in terms for the Center of Teaching for that. So really grateful for that.
Is that the distance education people that helped with the online course? That's interesting. So we have one last question, and I would like actually each of you to answer this one. Maybe we could start with Unjan and then work our way down the line. The question is, you're all well-established professors with highly successful careers. Many of you have had some experience mentoring international faculty. So do you have advice for either early career faculty and graduate students seeking mentoring, or any senior faculty and administrators who may be present on how best to mentor and support international faculty?
Well, I don't think I'm very excellent, esteemed faculty. I'm working on it. But I'm based on my experience, I like to emphasize on our different perspectives on teaching in the U.S. setting, such as we are bringing our asset, global perspective into U.S. classrooms. That is one thing I really cherish. Instead of I'm here as a foreign faculty, no, I'm here as your faculty and also bring my rich global experience into your classroom so you can be global educator. That is a big shift for me, so I like to emphasize on that perspective. At the same time, sometimes doctoral students from international background, because of their busy schedule, they sometimes focus on their teaching, their study, their publication, and not looking at the community. But I really want you to, if you have some time, even squeezing time to go outside, out of this campus and look at also feel the community as a volunteering opportunity. You can learn or you can use talent to this community too. So you can have this community member, even though you are maybe, from different countries. So that is, I think, a good benefit for me to, at least for me, having this community interaction as a volunteer. It's just, seeing students at the school level. I'm actually volunteering now for ELS students too. That gives me first joy personally, and secondly, that also gives me idea of how to improve my teaching. So that volunteering opportunity, if you have, it doesn't matter where you are in terms of program, gives you a sense of a community, and there are beautiful people out there, even though sometimes you feel like isolated, and sometimes, different culture gives you some, kind of distance, but at the same time, beautiful people, beautiful children out there too. So I think having community here is important for me. So that really helped so far. That's a I want to actually kind of stress in terms of your successful career in the United States. Yeah.
All right. For me, I will start with the new faculty and new graduate student. One thing that I will advise is to have a strong relationship, to build a strong relationship in the department and across the department. And you will ask me how. By attending these workshops that are offered across campus, if you go there, you find people to interact with, you introduce yourself, then you create a support network in your field and also in your teaching and your social well-being as well. So I have colleagues that I know across from the English department. I knew Anna before I saw her here. I know Gigi. And we are not in the same department, but we know each other. So if I meet her on the way, I'll say hello. So I have someone to say hello to on the way. So I'll say building this relationship is very, very important, and it allows strong support networks. And again, there are lots of workshops that are offered. Center for Teaching, Stanley Museum. There are so many events. International Studies offers a number of events that we can attend and connect with the people. With the seniors that are in the house, I think I will encourage open communication to the new people, or whether it's graduate students or new faculty. At least even like stop by to their office and say hello. Even give them a smile, they'll feel welcomed. And I think that is very important. Just checking on them, just stop by in their office and say hello. They may share something that is in their mind. So I find that to be very helpful when my chair, when I came here, will come, oh, how are you doing? She will walk through my office and just open the door, say, oh, how are you doing today? That made me feel so good. And I think that is important. It makes you feel like people know that you are there. And for all of us, I think it is nice and I think it is good to create a culture of understanding that we are all different and we need to celebrate our differences. And that's what we need to do. Several events, attending events, creating events that will bring us together to celebrate who we are.
I think for me, advice for mentoring and supporting international faculty and students, I think for me, I think it's important to stay proactive generally. So never stand still, and you don't know what you don't know. So again, as other people have said, I think it's important to have a network and support. In the College of Public Health, we have a system in place for mentorship of faculty, and that's put in place for early career faculty so that they have a clear line of maybe like a meta mentor, so that's somebody, usually your DEO, who you work with, and they give you overall advice and capacity for day-to-day things. And then you have more of a specialist mentor, someone in your own research area or similar level of expertise as you, who can guide you and, okay, this is how you need to work towards your next R01 or things like that. So I think that's important, to having those clear lines of mentorship. So we usually enter in the College of Public Health to a mentorship agreement, have very clear guidelines as to the role of that mentor and what advice they're going to give you and provide to you, and they sign that, and that's something that's filed in the institution. But I think it's more than that. There's a lot of informal mentoring that goes on. So as Beatrice said, networking with people and getting to know people. So I was kind of unfortunate. I started here and then the pandemic sort of hit about a year later. So for me, early in the point of coming newly to the US from a different country, integrating and getting to travel, that was all affected for a number of years. And I'm still feeling like my network is lagging behind. So for me, I still think it's important to make an effort to network, to learn practical skills. I think it's important to acknowledge your incremental steps. I came here, I had to learn how to drive on the right side of the road. I had to learn how to file my own taxes and build a credit score, right? So all of that is on the side. You're also navigating international politics and getting a visa, right? So you're moving from like H1B to EB1 or whatever it is. And I think the university was fantastic in navigating that process for me and moving towards, permanent residency, which I think is important for stability in this current environment. So I feel like, having that has helped as well, because there's a lot going on. You're moving yourself from a different location. I see that even for individuals moving from state to state, right? So it's a big upheaval for folks. So reaching out, getting support, and also just having that informal support in your own department is really nice. So people just acknowledge that you've had a difficult path, maybe more difficult than most, and you have unique situations and circumstances that sometimes get overlooked. When I'll just give you, I'll do an anecdote here. When I first came for my faculty interview, I traveled, 5,000 miles, and I literally arrived here about 10 minutes to midnight, and I had a 7 o'clock breakfast meeting. And then you can imagine what those interviews are like. I arrived with 6 inches of fresh snow in February, and I was minus 18 Celsius. It was really cold. And I just remember feeling like, wow, like this is a lot, but and you're getting bombarded then with meetings, breakfast meeting at 7 a.m. The snowplows were on the streets, and and I don't think I slept. I mean, if I slept 2 hours that night, I was lucky. But you get the point. Hopefully, I get my gist that there's a lot of things that are taken for granted. I know I did have my DO tell me afterwards, in hindsight, Michael, I just forgot that you've come from Ireland, and that's a long way to come, and the time difference alone, 6 hours, and I'm sure you're tired. And I'm like, yeah, just a bit. But yeah, I think overall they've been very sympathetic and supportive. So
I don't have too much to add. So for early career faculty and grad students, I think mentoring is certainly important, but also be your own mentor and try to think about like what are sources of confidence, what are things that give you confidence, like in the classroom when you teach. My own experience is when you're passionate about the subject, right? So remember why you're teaching, because you love that stuff, okay? It drives you. And you really want your students to learn it, to share that passion with them. Students will be able to tell, right? And these are qualities in an individual, in a teacher, that are completely separable from where you're from, what your language is, whatnot, right? So think about that, and I think that can be a source of like confidence, or like be your own mentor as an international faculty member in a different environment, teaching students who are socialized differently with very different backgrounds and whatnot. So that's my personal piece of advice. Then for senior faculty members, and what Beatrice mentioned really resonated with me. So check in with people, ask, don't wait to be asked, right? And that can make a difference. And people sometimes will just share some things or something that they encountered or that was a struggle. And then you can talk about it and say, oh, hey, I know that John does this thing in his classroom and it seems to be working. So why don't you ask him for some advice? It might be something that helps you as well with this particular situation. And then also at like a more departmental or collegiate level, make some of these expectations transparent and find ways to communicate them, and not only with international faculty, with people who start at the institution. So coming back to that first anecdote, is this going to be curved? What was the problem? Well, I wasn't briefed, and of course I didn't ask either. I should have asked, but maybe I could have been briefed, say, hey, this is how that works, and this is the language of the college, and this is what we actually do. So this is what your students are going to expect when they go and take your class, right? So these types of things. And I think we can institutionalize some of this a little bit more without being overly formal, and it would help like people who start at an institution to understand the, let's say, the local customs and traditions, right? How things work out in the field. And then for administrators, I would say, and also I'm just repeating what has been said earlier. So let's celebrate this international aspect, right? What we have. It's a richness. It's something that enriches our campus, that enriches our students' educational experience. It's something that we should celebrate with events like this year, right? So big shout out to the organizers. And thanks everybody for coming and for listening.
Thank you all so much. I heard many things that I really loved from the advice that you all have, and I think passion should drive any classroom. I love that reminder. Also, like Michael, I spend way too much time on teaching, so I think we all do. So I don't know if it's too much time, but I put a lot of time into it. Yeah. So yeah, I think at this point we can maybe turn to Q&A or comments, or if anybody wants to share anecdotes, I think that would be terrific. So Anna's going to handle that for us.
Happy to run the mic, and this event is recorded, right? I think there's a camera there, so we'll want to be sure to use the mic so folks can hear any questions or comments that people might want to share. Are there any from the group?
Some of you have mentioned being at other places in the United States or other universities, and I just wondered how that experience affected or changed or, molded your experience now at Iowa.
Yes, I came from Tanzania to the University of Wisconsin-Madison as a Fulbright scholar and then as a graduate student doing my master's degree and my PhD. And my major is in African languages and literature and second language acquisition. So at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, it was 2007 to 2024. That's when I was there. And there were number of programs on language teaching, number of workshops, summer institute, workshops every month about language teaching and language pedagogy. So that has prepared me a lot when it comes to teaching a language in the classroom now. So I feel well prepared by attending the University of Wisconsin-Madison.
Does anyone else want to respond to that? I'm curious a little bit, just building on that question about the regional differences. If you were in a different part of the country and then, now we're in Iowa, if you were tuned into those regional differences, or maybe not as much, maybe in retrospect more because of, once you come from international location, you come to the United States, and then it's like, okay, this is the United States. But then once you move around a bit, you start seeing those differences. Not to co-opt your question, but.
For me, the different accent gives me a hard time, actually. When I got PhD here, and then for 2 years, I lived in North Carolina to teach general education course. And then the North Carolina accent is totally different. And another task for me to understand is different English. That was the one thing. And also, I'm from social studies background, and I'm teaching social studies. So different political, some climate, and gives me sometimes more sense of safety, or less sense of safety. I don't want to get into deeper in this formal setting, but I have a different kind of experience. Whether you are in Illinois, sometimes there are a lot of people around me look like me. But I'm not saying this is different from in terms of various experience, but it's just different. Like having different language and diverse community, and a less diverse community, and I have to navigate, but at the same time, good experience with my students at the University of Iowa. So it's just different. Like international wise, from nation to nation is different, and also in the United States, I can see very different language and climate and all interaction and accent. That also are very different. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to add here is, let's say, cultural norms in the classroom. And I know not from my own experience, but from other people's experiences, that can differ widely across states and institutions. And it also differs internationally. And I'll just give you an example. In Germany, when I taught, there was always at least one student, usually a guy, whose sole objective was to find something that's wrong and then point it out in front of the whole class. Okay. In Iowa, our students are very nice, right? So there's the truth to the Iowa nice. Sometimes they're too nice. Sometimes I'm talking about something and the slide is not on, and I'm talking and talking and talking, and it makes no sense because the slide is not on, and nobody bothers to point it out because they don't want to embarrass the instructor, right? So if anything, I would say that there's sometimes these cultural differences, like classroom culture, right? So how we interact in the classroom. And sometimes I would appreciate it if they would challenge me a little bit more. Say, guys, I just said something that was really stupid. Did anybody notice? Say something, right? Scream at me, yell at me. We want to have some discussion and figure this out, right? So I have to make them, right? But at the same time, I'm happy that I don't have this student who tries to prove the instructor wrong in every single class. So I can live without that as well. But I think there are all these cultural differences in terms of classroom culture, and not only internationally, also within the US or across institutions and so on. And that's something that you kind of experience as you move around and teach in different places.
Questions?
I really enjoyed listening to your conversation. Thank you so much. It's making me think how these days are very challenging, and how much I too appreciate the sort of global diversity that you all represent and that is represented here at the university. I think we all seek, belonging and connection. And those of us, who are interested in that type of belonging and connection, might like more opportunities to engage with folks that are teaching, that are from countries around the world, or who's, I'm the child of a German immigrant. Used to live in Mongolia. I teach international studies now, so it feels very much like a part of my life. But as I was listening, I was thinking, I don't know how often I really have the opportunity to engage with colleagues from other countries, and I'm wondering if, I don't know, Russ or the Center for Teaching, if there are regular opportunities for us to get together, talking about pedagogy or just talking about life, our families, etc. I think I and maybe many others would enjoy such opportunities. So I'm wondering, do those exist? And if so, where? And if not, how do we start that?
Response.
I mean, we don't have any formal mechanisms to do the type of things that you're talking about, Peter, but, we do have occasions such as these. We organize a lot of colloquia, readings, cultural events, where we hope that, where people will attend, obviously, and normally all of these events are followed by a reception. And we hope that during the reception, people can kind of organically connect and get to know one another and become at least acquaintances, if not friends, at some point down the line. Looks like Tamar has.
I like Russ was saying. I mean, there are these types of opportunities where you can meet people, but I've also found that sometimes spaces that we didn't call that thing become that thing. In particular, this semester, I am facilitating a book club that we do every semester. And I've found that the people who choose to come to the book club, we probably have more international, more graduate students, more people who maybe don't fit into the professor, faculty, tenure track mold, who often say, I don't have these opportunities to connect. And I'm looking for them, right? And we do have some tenure track faculty there as well. But in the book clubs become more than talking about the book. It's become talking about our lives, sharing our experiences, because a text is just an excuse to get together in some ways. So that has become, I think, a really interesting space for the kind of thing you're talking about. In addition, the Center for Teaching, Anna could maybe say more about this. We have communities of practice where, you can propose something and you get a group together and then you have this more formalized space to meet. And it can be around any topic. So international teaching, for one, is a amazing topic that people could gather around. So there are opportunities to start them as well.
Other questions or comments? Oh,
So each of you talked about this during the panel discussion. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more about your pedagogical style and how the methodological approaches that you were exposed to in your home countries are integrated into your teaching now, either consciously or unconsciously, because we're all sort of the product of kind of hybrid cultures and kind of synthetic knowledge, and synthetic not in the artificial sense, but in the sense of kind of coalescing around different or bringing together different approaches, different experiences, and different mindsets. And so I'm wondering how you integrate or incorporate the pedagogical approaches that you grew up with and were trained with in your home countries, and how they manifest themselves in your current teaching, either to the benefit of students or I don't want to say to their detriment, or how do they respond? How do they respond to someone who wasn't brought up in this system? So I think everyone would enjoy hearing that your perspectives along those lines.
I think from where I come from, the actual plan of study or program of study for a PhD, for example, is so much different. So it's a 3-year program. There's very little didactic coursework and learning. And a lot of the learning that you want to do, if it's a specialized skill, you go somewhere else. So I'll go to like the London School of Hygiene, Tropical Medicine to learn a particular methodology and apply that to my data. That's, these like short-term courses that you would do. There was very little didactic coursework outside basic statistics. So for my program of study, it's been very different. So applying pedagogies that I have learned there to here, there's not a lot of opportunity. And in a way, that's a good thing, because I feel like when I've come here, I've seen that this is a real strength of the US-based institution in terms of elongating the PhD process for graduate students and having a lot of students that matriculate through a master's program to a PhD. And so we've got this longer duration of study with an intense focus and they develop a research interest area. And in terms of, their plan of study, they're just more developed and more mature. And they don't realize, I think a lot of our students are very high caliber in the College of Public Health anyway, and they don't realize how good they are. But me having that perspective of where I've come from, I kind of feel like, oh, well, I can kind of give them that lift and say, yeah, that there's benefits to this. You don't realize that your programming skills, your use of OR or Stata or SAS is so much more developed than a lot of your peers and from other countries, because you're just getting a lot more experience and didactic pushing at this. And so their programming languages, for example, are so much more far advanced than mine would be going into a postdoc than a lot of our students here, for example.
So mine will be different. My undergrad is in language pedagogy and adult education. When I came to the United States, I was introduced to the standards for foreign language teaching in the United States, which uses communicative approach for teaching. That means students have to speak the language. And therefore, when we're in the classroom, the methods that we teach, we're sharing about our own life, our daily life activities. What is your name? Where are you from? How many brothers do you have? what do you like to do? So those kind of conversation in the classroom, they really bring students together. We form a community. A Swahili classroom, and I think most language causes a community, because that's where you go, talk to someone, share your own life, share your day, tell what you like and what you do not like. So, and also my background as adult education or adult educator, there is one thing that I realize, it's in me, that understanding your students, understanding your learner, and know that they have so many things to do, not only what you are giving them. And I think that's what I have in me, and I realize students appreciate that. And they will sometimes share with me, oh, I'm glad you could understand this. So that's what I see different when I am in the classroom.
So I can maybe add to that. So from my own upbringing, let's say looking at undergrad classes. So the undergrad classes that I took in Germany were very heavily lecture based. So I guess the best way to describe it was there's the professor who is the sage on the stage and shares his or her wisdom. And then the students sit there, absorb the wisdom, and then they leave the room smarter. Okay, so that's the model. And for math classes, so my undergrad was in math and then also business. I think that's still true, right? So there's proofs that are written with the chalk on the board. I think they still have the chalkboards there. I gotta check next time I'm over there. And then you copy that, and that's how you learn. There are tutorials, but what happens in the tutorial is somebody shows you how to solve the exercises. And the hypothesis is that you worked on those before. Sometimes it's incentivized, sometimes it's not. So I still have lecture-based elements in my instruction, because sometimes I feel it's the most efficient thing to do, to just show students, this is how this thing works, okay? I also have tutorial style elements, but they're integrated within the classroom. And students always have time to try things out, either as pairs or in small groups, and they're incentivized to do so, right? So I have a very tight incentive system with some flexibility, right? So they can drop a certain amount of whatever for illness or whatever it might be, for sickness or whatever. So I use these elements from, let's say, my own education, but the way I mesh them together, I integrate them, is completely different. And it uses more of that mindset of a student-centered philosophy, how to keep them engaged, how to make sure they want to come and they learn something each and every class. And then that you also have evidence that they actually know how to do things, right? Because if you lecture and they write things down, you don't really know, are the students capable of doing that, right? But if you have them do something, get stuck, and then show them how to overcome those hurdles in very small steps, then you do have this incremental evidence that there's actual knowledge or procedural knowledge that was gained in a particular classroom. So I would say I'm still using these elements from my own educational upbringing, but the way I use them is fundamentally different. And it took a while to get there, okay? So I think I started out a little bit too much on that end of the spectrum, that's the sage on the stage. And then what the students write in the evals is, oh, it's all slides after slides after slides, right? So it just puts us to sleep. It's like, oh, okay, wait a minute. So we got to break this up, right? So we got to do this differently so that there's more engagement and the students appreciate the time in the classroom more and get more out of it. And yeah, so that's just from my personal experience.
I would just add to that, just in terms of, since I've come to Iowa, things like that are available, like Top Hat and training in that, and support, institutional support for those services that encourage active participation from students, has been really useful. We're just going through CEEF accreditation, which is our accreditation body for the College of Public Health, and we're being taught all the time different modes of assessment, and transparency and learning in higher educations, like tilting your assignments, changing your rubrics, so that students know exactly, very transparently, what it is they have to do to complete an assignment well. So all of those things have evolved in my 6 years of being here, things that I didn't have before that I now have, which I'm very grateful for.
Yes. And also related to teachers' position as a professionalism. So I was trained as a professional teacher in South Korea using just formal title, and also when you are not supposed to actually call your teachers or professor's name. So yeah, kind of consciously, unconsciously, I teach my U.S. students in that kind of direction. So they call me actually Dr. Kim. I'm not saying I want to that title, but at the same time, kind of heavy based on my South Korea experience. And also, I like to teach them as a professional teacher in the future, showing that kind of formal title, and they can be called, formal title in their school experience later. And at the same time, also, I encourage them to have some formal email exchange body, even though I'm not saying U.S. Professors don't say that, but I focus more on that kind of behavioral expectation more frequently. You gotta show dear Dr. Kim, dear so on, and then body, and then conclude with these things. You may think a little bit of this minor thing, but at the same time, I focus on their high expectation of professionalism, maybe based on my background. I'm not sure, but I really emphasize actually on my teacher candidates to show professionalism. And yeah, that is a kind of one thing maybe I can think about. Yeah.
I think we had one more question, and I think we just have enough time for a short one, so I'll hand that over.
Well, actually, my question kind of follows what you've just been talking about. But coming from a background in science where there was a lot of, didactic, and then going to medicine where, again, there's a whole body of knowledge to be learned. My question is about office hours. And so the expectation, like in the biology department, was to have discussion sections where the students came, and it was kind of a round table with 6 or 7 students talking to the professor and, going into more depth. And you kind of learn which students are going to be interested in going on working in a lab, their minds think in a certain way. And then I went to language. And let me tell you, the students did not come to office hours. And if I came regularly, it was, oh my goodness, unusual. And so I think it was a cultural thing and just the expectation of an additional learning time to kind of bring the students into more of the body of knowledge and the way of thinking and the history of it and opportunities that you might be heading toward and, kind of growing students as potential professors and things. And of course, with doctors, you want them to be thinkers at the bedside. Yeah. And anyway, I don't know how we teach that to incoming faculty because I really found it was in language departments a real eye-opener that somebody actually came to office.
Any brief reflections on that from our panel?
So just in response to that, I mean, I in the College of Public Health, our expectations for office hours, I would just usually reach out to my students. It depends on the course I'm teaching. I teach 2 courses primarily. One is Introduction to Epidemiology, which is a large course, and we have a large body of students, and I usually co-teach that course in the fall semester, and then it's online in the spring and in the summer. And so it works throughout the year. But for me, in terms of office hours, I kind of, in the syllabus, we're specified to demarcate office hours. And I usually put an online office hour and I set that at a time that I think most students will be available. And usually for me, that's between either 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. when students don't have other competing time, in terms of other courses that they're taking and would more likely to come. But I usually just ask them, is there a preference? I can give them an idea of my calendar. This is what times suit me. Any of these work better for you guys? And I would do that in the first day of class and then would set a standard time. And then the co-teacher and I would alternate in those. But to break it up, we also do tutorial sessions. So we use our TA for that course to have tutorial sessions. The issue being that there's a lot of surface learning going on, and we want to encourage deep learning. And so we want students to probe beyond the syllabus and the handouts and read deeper. And so for that, the tutorial sessions help with that. You know, we get the students to submit problems that they're having in advance. So the TA has a bit of lead time to look at those problems. If they're looking at problem sets or other homework assignments, they can query that in those tutorial sessions. And anything that was difficult in class that we didn't get a lot of time to cover, we only had 90 minutes, you know, then we use that time to go into deeper learning for the students before assessments come up. But like you, office hours can sometimes be hit and miss. In the fall semester, I find it quite busy, and in spring, summer semester, they're quite light. And that's, again, students, whether come or not, I just make every opportunity available to them and just say that I'm also available outside office hours. You know, so if you want to come speak to me one-to-one, you know, please do. And then I make proactive measures too. You know, sometimes students' performance, I look at student performance. If it's poor, then I will reach out to those students, and I won't target them individually, but I will do, like, you know, a BCC email to a group of students who are performing poorly, and ask, you know, please come see me. You know, I'd love to speak to you and see ways that we can assist to improve your grade, things like that. But yeah, a lot of that at a graduate level, we don't expect to be hand-holding so much. So.
Well, speaking of time, always a good sign when the conversation has to end because of time. So I have the privilege of having the microphone, which means I get to thank the one person in the room who's not yet been thanked. So thank you, Russ, so much for helping to organize this and for your support of this event. Thank you to our hosts and international programs. And thank you especially to our panelists and the folks who were sort of organizing the questions. Let's give them a round of applause and thank you all for being here.